Coming up on Finding Better podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Matt Kutz, who's the author of the upcoming book, Becoming Epic. And we talk about his journey in having been diagnosed with metastatic prostate cancer and what he did in the face of that adversity. He wrote this book, and it's all about starting with yourself, becoming better, and not only becoming the person you want to be, but becoming the person you were created to be. It's incredibly inspiring. He's an amazing person. Please share this with folks you love. Here we go. Hello, 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 and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I'm your host. And this is where we share real life experiences of people who've been there and done that. Because, sometimes the best path to success in life is to follow in the footsteps of people who've been there. And so that's what we talk about. We talk about real life experiences and wisdom. And today, I have Dr. Matthew Kutz, and that's the last time I'm going to call him doctor because he told me not to do that. But he is a PhD, and I want to just let you know he is a clinical professor in the Doctor of Athletic Training program at Florida International University, where his work centers on leadership development. And check this out, because we're going to talk about it, contextual intelligence. Now, Matt, you also have a new book called Becoming Epic. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot about that. Straight up front, so people can decide whether they want to stay with us or not. What do you want folks to get out of our time together today?
I would love for your listeners to be able to walk away feeling energized and excited that they actually can become better than what they currently are, no matter where they're at on their performance spectrum. And so I think by learning the EPIC framework, which we'll talk about, they actually can become better and overcome mediocrity, which is the subtitle to my book. And I think that's valuable. And I know we all want to be better. And I don't think your listeners would be listening if they didn't want to be better.
Yeah, well, it's called Finding Better. It's called Finding Better, right? And let me share with the group the full title of your book. It's called Becoming Epic: How Excellence, Perception, Inspiration, and Compassion Drive Joy and Fulfillment and help you transcend mediocrity. And so that whole transcending mediocrity is huge. But I also want everybody to know that you are a very accomplished person. You've I went through Amazon. I checked you out, Matt, and I went to Amazon, and oh my gosh, he's got this whole list of books. Some of them, one's called Contextual Intelligence. Then you have Leadership and Management and Athletic Training, 42 Leadership Insights, Leadership Questions for Healthcare Professionals and leadership and management and athletic training, and on and on and on and on. Now, let's start talking about this from the standpoint of your own, what you refer to as your own epic journey with your recent cancer diagnosis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's start there, shall we?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it was November of 23. I was actually training for a triathlon. Um, I've always prided myself on, I want to be quick to say, while I run triathlons, I'm not a triathlete, so I do it kind of recreational. But I was
Hey, the
yeah,
fact that you run triathlons, I have never run a triathlon.
yeah.
I will never run a triathlon.
I said the same thing, John. I said the same thing. So if
Okay.
you want to truly become better, then maybe this
My
is.
goodness, that's a level of mental toughness I don't know if I can get
Yeah.
to, but yeah,
But
congratulations.
so I was training for that, and I crashed my bike during a training ride and
Mm,
broke my hand, broke my thumb. And I was, long story short, is I am now following up with my physician a few months after the injury and just doing a standard follow-up to check the hand, make sure it's okay, and that kind of thing.
sure.
And he happened to note in my medical file that I hadn't had my 50-year-old, checkup kind of a thing, the whole deal, the colonoscopy, all this stuff, the
Oh,
blood
what
work,
fun. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's why I
If
was
you're not
avoiding it,
50, you're in for a treat.
Oh yeah. So he says, "Hey, you never came in to do this. We ought to do this." And which included a PSA screening, a prostate sensitive antigen, or
Yep.
specific antigen is what PSA stands for. And so okay, fine, whatever. I was healthy, so I had no worries. And at any rate, about 2 or 3 days later, I get a phone call from his nurse telling me, "Hey, your PSA is off the chart. You need to see a specialist right away." Blah
Oh
blah
boy.
blah. And long story short, I ended up being diagnosed with advanced metastatic prostate cancer. And at
Oh,
first, we
whoa.
thought it was going to be like the normal. I hate for any cancer survivors or warriors out there, they know what I mean. But my doctor was like, my surgeon initially was like, "Well, don't worry, prostate cancer is the quote good kind of cancer. It's very treatable." Blah blah blah.
But it was metastatic.
Right. Well,
And
we
and
didn't know that
it,
at the
what did
time.
for the audience who doesn't know and me who thinks he knows but may not, what does metastatic mean?
It means it spread. It means it was spreading. So they found some in my pelvis and in my lymph nodes in my groin. And
Oh
so
boy.
that was very alarming. So we went from the good kind of easy kind of cancer to treat, not going to be a problem, very minimal disruption to your life, to okay, you could be dead in about 5 years if we don't take care of this. It became all of a sudden this urgent medical emergency, and so we opted for the radical prostatectomy, ADT, which stands for androgen deprivation therapy, which is actually the hardest part of the entire thing, in my opinion. And then the ADT includes, like, I never had to do formal chemo, but the chemo pills kind of thing to reduce certain androgens in my body, and then radiation. And so I say that to set up this thing. So like I said, I was active. I had a very active and exciting public speaking tour. I've written other books, as you mentioned, and one of my books, Contextual Intelligence: How to Navigate Uncertainty with 3D Thinking, had was an award-winning leadership book. And so I have had, a bunch of clients, Fortune 500 companies, keynote stages, things where I was touring around and speaking on this concept of contextual intelligence and 3D thinking. And so I had to cancel a bunch of those because of the radiation. And that broke my heart because it's actually a lot of fun for me. I love it. And so 40 days of radiation, and every day, same time, no excuses, can't miss kind of a thing. So I had to cancel a bunch of things, and I was feeling a little blue. So I developed a challenge for myself along the lines of, becoming better and trying to better myself. I set a little challenge that I would write 1,000 words every day for the 40 days of my radiation. And it was about day three
Okay,
of,
back
yep.
up, back up. Okay, so you get the shock of you get this first shock of your life that you have prostate cancer. Then you get the second shock of your life that it has metastasized.
Mhm.
And and as you're going through this, you're having to go through chemo, you're having to go through radiation. You realize that you're going to go through 40 days of radiation and decided to write 1,000 words.
Yes.
1,000 words a day during your 40 days of radiation about what?
So my original plan was to just use it as a catharsis, as a journaling experience, to just, get out my emotions, my feelings, my
You
thoughts,
bet.
letters to my kids, that kind of a thing was my original intent. And then
Hmm.
maybe if it was good, turn it into a memoir or something like that later on down the road. Well, it was about day three. Well, I know it was day three, and I started writing on what I thought it meant to be an epic person, and how this was a challenge to me that I needed to overcome. And if I could get to the other side of this health challenge, that I could maybe be epic the way that I've always thought of epic. Now, in full disclosure, I had already had a mini lecture. So I teach in a doctoral program uh, where it's modular based because everybody's in there getting doctorates, so it's not like a normal classroom. So it's modular based, and I have a module on epic leadership and what I think it means to be epic, and it's basically just a 20-minute little lecture and then some readings and discussion board and stuff like that. But I had already framed this idea of what I thought it meant to be epic, which was be excellent, be perceptive, be inspired, and be compassionate. And so it was day three that I'm writing on this and how I myself needed to make sure I remained excellent, not to give myself any excuses. Well, I've got cancer, so I don't need to try as hard or this kind of thing. You know, perception is huge, and that was the big battle for me. How does this diagnosis affect how I perceive the world and reality? And then of course, when you get a diagnosis like that, you're like, well, where is the inspiration coming from? Where do I find inspiration? And then compassion. Not only did I have self-compassion, which is actually a unique thing that a lot of people don't talk about, but it also helped me be much more compassionate to other people and empathetic, so to speak, that I probably normally wouldn't have been, but because of this diagnosis. So I was just writing on that. And John, I tell you what, I don't know, something magical happened, and for the next 37 days, I just couldn't stop writing on all these aspects of these four elements of being epic. And at the end of that 40 days, I had a book in me, or had a book produced called Becoming Epic. And I literally wrote it in 37 days. And now that doesn't include the editing and all the other things that went in, but I had the rough draft manuscript of the book that is now coming out this summer, that I'm very excited about, called Becoming Epic, and how to
Okay, so
use
let me
things.
yeah, let's back up here for a second. Now, um, you started this part of your journey by writing, you know, as you said, kind of a cathartic experience, just kind of writing your experience and everything. And and then it started to become something more than that.
Mhm.
Now, were you writing when you were talking about becoming epic and the different pieces or the different parts of that? Were you writing to yourself, or were you writing generally about that other people from the perspective of other people learning?
Yeah, that's a great question because I had shifted in my mindset. It started about me and how I could encourage myself, really, and
Okay,
how I could
okay,
strengthen myself.
that's amazing because the first thing that came to my mind is everybody should do that.
Mhm.
Everybody should do that. You started off writing this from the perspective being introspective on yourself, right? What it means to me to become epic. And I talk to folks all the time. One of the things that I've learned, I'm retired, and I'm 64 years old. And it wasn't until the end of my life, not end of my life. Hopefully, it's not the end of my life, but in this part of my life that I decided to write. And I've learned that there's lots and lots of people who are aspiring authors who write and are old. They're older people
Yeah.
because they want to write about their experience. And so what I tell people is, you know what? One thing I wish someone had told me is to write your story now and then go live it,
Right.
right? Write the story that you want to look back on 30 years from now and then go live it.
Right. One of
And,
the
and
exercises that I do with my students is exactly that. I make them do two things. I make them write their retirement speech and their eulogy, and then see, okay, are you on track to live those things? And if not, what do you need to do to get there?
I have to tell you, Matt, when I was a kid, and then, like I said, it was a long time ago, something that stuck with me was an exercise that one of my teachers gave me. Yeah, I gave the class, and that was to write your gravestone.
Yeah. Yep.
And I did, and it has stuck with me for over 50 years. And I use that, and in my gravestone says, "Here lies John, a good son, a good husband, a good father, a good friend,
Yeah.
a man of God."
Mhm.
And um, I check myself all the time against that. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It
I
really
do
is
the
amazing.
same, and my mine says the same. I actually was doing a talk for a group, and they always ask, send your bio in, kind of a thing. So the bio that I use for my talks are, Matt Kutz is married to his best friend and love of his life for 30 years.
I love it.
He prides himself on being a husband, father, grandfather, and friend, and is passionate about the pursuit of Christ, and to go on from there, and that's really, I think, the foundation to becoming better,
Oh my
to being
gosh.
better and finding better is starting with that perspective of who is it you want to be, and more importantly, who is it that you believe you were created to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. A lot of people don't do that. So
Yeah. A friend,
during, yeah,
one of the folks I interviewed challenged me one day, and I'm still in the middle of this challenge, to come up with my life's purpose in 7 words or less.
yeah,
And for the moment, I came up with my life's purpose as being to help people find love and God.
yeah,
And we'll see what happens. As I go through this process of refining this purpose, it'll be interesting to see how far off I am from that. But anyways, lest I digress, and I apologize for that. But you're on your journey. You wrote this book. You end up with a manuscript out of writing this book about becoming epic, that you started to write about how you can become epic.
right.
Um, and here you have a book ready to go that's gonna come out this summer.
Yeah, and it's been a crazy journey. As I go back, I remember when I finished it, I went to my wife and I said, "Honey, I think I just wrote the book I've always wanted to write."
I love
you
it.
know and it was, again, for me, but there was a point in the process, and I couldn't tell you when, but there was definitely a point in the process where I realized, okay, this is something more than I intended it to be. Of course, I
Hmm.
give credit to the Lord for that because I think he helped me, but it's
You
become
bet.
more than what I intended it to be. And I began to now think of the other person on the other end reading this and how it could be helpful for them. And that's when it became exciting for me. And it was really like, a fire in my bones, so to
Good
speak,
for you.
where I had to get it out.
Well, you gave credit to the Lord. I'll tell you, God probably gave you your prostate cancer so you could do this.
Some people have already told me
Um,
that.
you
Yeah,
know,
other people have
and
told
uh,
me
and
that
and
too.
who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Let's talk a little bit more about transcending mediocrity.
Yeah,
And after we talk about that, I also want to talk about, um, I think you use the term self-compassion,
yeah. Hmm.
right?
Yep,
Self-compassion. I've
yep.
not heard that before, so I want to talk
Okay,
about that because
absolutely.
I think that's really, really important. At least what I think of when I'm thinking about those words. So, talk about transcending mediocrity. What does that mean to you, and
Yeah.
what
So
what
for me,
what
it
could we do with that?
means, yeah, I mean, so again, in my world as a professor in my day job, I also do coaching and things like that. But so many students and so many people feel like they can't do more than they're currently doing. They can't
Hmm.
find better. And what's really important for me in my life message to people is, yes, you can find better, but it doesn't just come to you. Because I know so many people who are waiting for better, but they're not actively looking for better.
There you
And
go.
there's certain things that need to happen in order for you to actively look for better. And that's how I would define overcoming mediocrity. So many people are just satisfied with the status quo. I'm not the worst of the bunch, but I'm not the best of the bunch. And they're just in the middle. And that is really bothersome to me because I know people at the end of it all, they look back and they have some sort of regret about that. It's like I could have tried harder, I could have done better, I could have been a better husband, I could have been a better father, And by the way, when I talk about mediocrity, I don't mean career ambition. And I think that's important. I could have made more money, I could have had a bigger office, whatever. I don't believe that stuff ultimately fulfills you. I believe
Hmm.
when that day comes and you are assessing the quality of your life, you look to your relationships primarily as the indicator of success and the impact
Couldn't
that you
agree
make.
with you more.
And
Yep.
and I find so many people, and I've talked to so many people who get to that stage or are on a journey and they don't think about that. They don't think about the better. So when I talk about excellence and how important it is to be excellent, it's always doing your best. And I spend a lot of time in the book um, uh, going between or kind of comparing contrasting excellence to perfection. And I say, perfection isn't possible, but excellence is. And to me, excellence is you have a purpose behind everything you do. If you can't answer the question, why am I doing this? What value does it add? How will this make me better? Then don't do it.
And
That's
the answer is not as shallow as I'm doing this because it's my job. I'm
oh,
doing it
absolutely.
right. I mean, there's something more than that. I'm doing this because he's my kid. No, there's more
Right.
to
You're
you,
exactly
you,
right.
you need to go a little bit
You
deeper.
have to go deep. And that's one of the things in the coaching, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, is, I forget who said it, but there's this famous technique of ask why 7 times. What I'm doing this for my better job, for my job, because it's my job. Well, why? Well, because I need to get good marks. Well, why? Because I need to have income for my mortgage. Well, why? Because I want to provide for my family. And you keep going, why? Eventually you get to the real reason. And one of the things I tell people all the time is you're telling me good reasons, but you're not telling me the real reason.
Right,
You know,
right,
yeah.
right.
And that's what's important. And somebody who operates in an excellent mindset is always honest and vulnerable with themselves enough to say the real reason I'm doing this is. And then if it doesn't add value, they have the courage to let it go and pursue
Right.
those things that bring excellence. And then and then we can talk about perception. And I don't know if we want to talk about all of them,
Yeah,
but
just real quick, just real quick.
yeah,
I want to, the what you said about ask why 7 times is really, really important, and that's a wonderful, wonderful comment to share with everybody. And I kind of chuckled to myself because I've got 3 little grandkids, and my 6-year-old has gotten into this. Why? It's
right,
like,
yep, yep,
stop
yep,
it,
yep,
right? It's why?
yep,
But setting aside that part of it, which inside our head says, stop asking why,
right,
ask why.
yes, yes,
And it's an introspective question, and you're not doing it to be annoying. You're doing
right.
it, you're doing it to learn.
Yeah, you're doing it to expose the bias and the that is covering the real reason why you're about something. And we have to be, you know, aggressive in that. And that's the other part about the going back to the mediocrity question is
Right.
I just don't think people are aggressive enough or intentional enough in their life to actually find better, and because better is out there. And that's what's beautiful about it.
It's
It's, they say the enemy to great is good, right? I mean, you probably heard that many times
mhm.
or even said it yourself is so often we settle for good enough when there is better available. And we just have to be aggressive and intentional about that. And that's what it means in my mind to be excellent.
And I wanted to ask you, you'd mentioned um, that people just accept it. People just
Yeah.
accept where they are. Why do you think? I mean, I'm sure there's a whole host of reasons, and I asked myself that question. Why is it that it's so easy to accept mediocrity? Is it because people don't have hope? They don't have self-confidence? They don't care? They're happy. Why do you
I'll
think
tell you
that
what I
people get
believe. I
stuck?
believe it's because it's not the last place. And I really believe that because I know a lot of great people, and I'm sure you do too, and all your listeners do, on why is somebody could be better than what they are? Why are they settling for what they have? The potential. We talk about people think we have potential, and I've come to believe that people settle for mediocrity because it's not last place. They know not to be in last place. They know not to be the bottom of the barrel. They know not to be worse. So they do enough to get up to the middle, and somewhere in the middle where they can say, listen, there's a few people out there who are better than me, but the reason they're better than me is because they're truly better than me. And they've done more than I'm willing to do. They absorb more costs than I'm willing to absorb, things like that. So that's good, and I'm not the worst. So I'm going to settle right here in the middle and I can be content. And I believe
Got
that
it.
that is the real issue of why mediocrity is so prevalent because people just don't want to do what it takes. That's why I said it's important to be aggressive and intentional about becoming better. And their metric is all wrong because they're basing it also on comparing themselves to other people, which we shouldn't be doing either. We should be comparing
Right.
ourselves to our ability.
Our
That's
ability
where I
and
think
potential. Yep.
mediocrity is a
Yep.
crying shame. It's because it's not that you're not as good as someone else, it's that you're not as good as you can be. And
There
so
you go.
they're
There you
afraid to
go.
go there. And so they settle for mediocrity.
I was having a conversation with my son-in-law, who is a absolute prince of a man. And he grew up, in uh what do you call it? Public housing.
Mhm.
He didn't, his mom was first generation Vietnamese, doesn't speak English very well, didn't speak any English when she came to this country. And, one of the things that I tell people these days is that, the world has changed since you and I were growing up. And in today's world, I think one of the major keys to success that wasn't necessarily there when we were there was to build a muscle of being scrappy.
Mhm.
And there are so many opportunities, so many things that people can do. And this young man, he's a CPA. He self-taught himself. He went to school to learn accounting, but he self coached himself to pass the CPA exam the first time.
Wow.
He's now a CPA. He now is also an accounting consultant. He's working as a CPA for a company, but he's also got his own CPA and accounting firm that he's grown. And this kid, he grew up having, I mean, my son-in-law grew up with the kind of childhood that, we hear our grandparents talking about, walking to
Right.
school in the snow and having to take the bus and waiting. The bus was late because it was stuck in the snow. And,
Right.
and he just personifies scrappiness because he's doing unbelievably well. And I asked him to be on my podcast because just unbelievably inspiring story. And he said no. He says I don't want to be on it because I don't want to be out there. I said, well, what is it, David? What is it that drives you, that makes? He says two things: passion and desire.
Yeah.
He says passion and desire. I have this driving desire to do better and better and better and be the best I can be. And which is what you and I would love to help people,
Right.
is a mindset that we'd love to, help people achieve. So how do you do that? Can you get people from, well, I mean, your book is about transcending mediocrity. So how do we
Right.
do that?
Yeah. So one is you've got to learn to identify the stage of satisfaction and this idea of contentment. Like I said, I think it's helpful to point out to people, and again, it takes some coaching and some savvy. You just don't bluntly say, but there are ways to point out to people that like, okay, listen, you're settling for less than what you're capable of because you're afraid of failing. And that's really what I think it ultimately comes down to is people like your son-in-law, like my kids and other people who I'm also, incredibly proud of pursuing their dreams, doing their thing. I taught them, and I was very intentional with my sons to make sure that it was okay to try and fail. And then and I am very
Absolutely.
adamant about this process, the iterative process. It shows up in my teaching. It shows up in the way I raise my kids. It shows up in the way that I mentor the people that are in my circle. And that is, you have to understand the importance of iteration. And just because something isn't perfect the first time doesn't mean it won't get better the second time. And if we're always thinking about best instead of thinking about better, we're going to fail. And because that's why I think it's so important we understand the difference between excellence and perfection. Because so many people are like, well, I want to go after this. This is the best, so to speak. They do it and they don't make it. That's because they've skipped too many steps. So we've got to go back and reframe the mindset to be like, okay, listen, all we need to do right now is a little bit better than last time. And then this time we need to do a little bit better than last time. And it's in our journey of finding better that we actually become the person we want to become. And that's why adversity is so important. That's why, when things come your way, like a horrible medical diagnosis, you have to realize it's not the end, but it's the beginning of something. And it's my job to find out what that thing is. I have a strong faith that forces me or requires me to believe that all things work out for good that those that love the Lord. And so I go with that. So I don't know how, and it's still confusing me, and me and my doctors are still going through it. And I'm not the guy who's like, shunning medical. I'm doing everything that my doctors are telling me to
Right,
do,
right, right, right.
and all these
Absolutely.
kinds of things. But in the same side, I know that it's an iterative process. Matter of fact, I had an oncology appointment this morning, and I was whining to my doctor. It's like, why is this so hard? This is taking too long. I should be better than this by now, kind of thing. And he had to remind me, Matt, you're not thinking right here. Think about the process. Think about the diagnosis. Think about all the stuff that happened to your body. You're actually doing very well. You're better. You're better than you were a month ago. You're going to be better next month than you are this month. And all I'm thinking about is what I can't do. And he's reminding me of the things that I am now able to do that I wasn't. And those perspectives are really, really important.
No kidding. I mean, when you think about when I think about that conversation with your doctor, right? Where you're going, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that. And, you know, you keep saying, I can't, I can't, I can't. And your shoulders literally start to come down and your
Right,
spirit is, I can't. But your doctor comes back and says, but look at what you can do. You could do
right.
this, you could do that, you could do this, you could do that. And, and, um, and I think, you know what? I think you just nailed the essence of coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, that is it. That is it. Is to give people that belief and the hope and the hope in themselves.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that.
Well, and that one of the things that's really important to me is, and I teach this in the context of what I call foresight. And so I write about this a lot in my book on contextual intelligence, and 3D thinking are the three dimensions of time: hindsight, insight, and foresight. And how important to have all three dimensions of time operating in your life and in your decision making. And foresight, for example, is uh, um, juxtaposed to fantasy, because I believe we have too many people fantasizing about an idyllic world and not enough people with foresight about how they can be better. And so, for example, somebody who fantasizes about it, they sit there in their mediocrity and they're saying, boy, I would like to finish my graduate education. I would like to write a book. I would like to have a happy marriage. I would like a good fit, whatever it is. I would like to retire on the beach in Maui. Whatever it is, they have this fantasy of this different future than they're currently heading toward.
Hmm.
And then they say this phrase, and this is the phrase that I think is the litmus test between if you're living in fantasy or if you're living in with foresight. And that phrase is, I'd like to finish my novel, but I can't because. And I call it the I can't because clause. And when people who are say to themselves, boy, I would sure like to have a happy marriage, but I can't because. Boy, I sure wish my kids, behave better, but they can't because, or they won't because. Or, I'd like to get out of debt, but I can't because. I'd like to lose 20 pounds, but I can't because. And the second that I can't because clause comes up, and it manifests in different types of statements, but that's the gist of it. That's when I know, okay, you're living in a fantasy. We have to change from fantasy to foresight. Somebody who is living with foresight has the same vision of the future. Boy, I would love to be out of debt. And instead of saying I can't because, they actually develop an action steps to like, okay, here's how I'm going to get out of debt. And then they can articulate it. Because and I ask my sorry, my clients this, can you articulate to me verbally, you know, um, how you're going to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. And if they can say, boy, I'd like to get out of debt, this is one of my goals, and I just can't see how I'm going to do it, or I don't know how I'm going to do it, or it would be nice, then I know they haven't experienced foresight yet in this area. The second they can say, and by the way, it doesn't have to actually work out that way. They just have to have an actionable plan of, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend less. I'm going to put some controls on, my bank account app. I'm going to, whatever. It could be small things, big things, whatever. But as soon as they start to say, here's how I think it could happen, then I know that now they're living in the foresight mindset where they can now articulate a future that they want. And now we just work on that. Okay, are these reasonable steps? Is there enough iteration in there? Because a lot of times people don't, just like in a business, people don't scale a business properly, which is why a lot of businesses fail because they don't know how to scale it.
Right.
Same thing with personal growth and professional development. They don't know how to scale their own growth. They're like, well, I need to lose 50 pounds in 2 months. It's like, well, listen, that's not going to happen unless you have some dramatic surgery or something. But I'd like to get out of, $100,000 of debt by next Christmas. That's probably not going to happen, but we can make it in 3 Christmases, or we can we can lose the
Right.
weight in 18 months. Let's have a realistic scaling plan for your own development. That's why I go back to, we have to embrace the process of iteration and understand that it's a trial and error process all the way through. And then when we can get them that, foresight drives them forward.
Yeah, the your comment about failure and people being so fearful of failure is a mindset that I'm also faced with people I talk to all the time. And I can tell them all kinds of the story of Thomas Edison failing 1,000
Right,
times to invent the filament. No, it was 1,000 times he learned it didn't work.
right,
And it is. I mean, it's a life of experimentation. Experimentation, you call it iteration, but experiment, experiment, experiment. Iterate, iterate, iterate. And my personal experience is that some of the greatest lessons I've learned by failing,
right.
right? And okay, so what? And, I talked about my son-in-law. He's tried all different kinds of things. One of the things he tried was a balloon business, a
Mhm.
balloon and bubble business, and and it didn't work out. And so I told him before, and I asked him after, okay, so how do you feel about it? Are you okay? He goes, and he literally shrugged his shoulders like this and said, "Yeah, I'm just going to try something else."
Yep.
I'm like,
It's a
"Yes,
great attitude. It's a great
yes."
attitude.
And you
Yeah.
go, and something's gonna stick.
Right.
right? It's
Well,
statistically impossible to fail 100% of the
100% of the
time.
time, right? As long as you keep trying. That's right. No, that's so true. And that's the whole point of experimentation and iteration, like we're talking about. And that actually speaks to some of the third aspect of the EPIC framework, which is inspiration. Because what you're just describing is inspiration and how it is a renewable resource. So many people think
That's true.
inspiration is a one-off. It
No,
comes, that comes back to Greek mythology when we actually, or not we, but people actually, the culture believe that, well, creativity or inspiration comes from the muses, right? It either hits you or it doesn't. We say, I've lost my muse. I'm on I'm having writer's block or whatever. That's not a thing. There's no such thing as writer's block. It's We have to understand that inspiration isn't a finite resource, it's an infinite resource, and it's
you're
consistently
absolutely right.
renewable. And we renew it through what you're exactly describing, this experimental process. If we start thinking in terms of experimenting our way through life, then we will never run out of inspiration to try the next thing. And eventually we'll find those things that are important. And that's how I describe the process of discovering your passion. I've never been a huge fan of telling people discover your passion. What's your passion? Because I don't believe many people know it, which is another reason why mediocrity is so prevalent. When we talk about passion, they just think, well, these are the things I like to do. No, 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 that's not your
Right.
passion. The passion I tell people this: instead of pursue your passion, I say follow what makes you curious. And I think that's so critically important because I believe it's only in the process, that was an important word there. It's only in the process of pursuing the things that you're curious about. It's when you discover what you're truly passionate about. You've got to follow those questions. You've got to be willing to follow the rabbit trail. And because it's following the rabbit trail where you ask better questions and you start asking better questions and you realize that you're interested in something you didn't even know was a thing, and all of a sudden you begin to frame your passion, and that's how that comes to be, which then leads us directly into compassion. What is compassion, right? So if you're a like the study of words at all, compassion is a compound word with the prefix com, which is Latin for with or beside or, alongside of. So com with passion. So compassion literally means to do things with passion, right? Now, here's where we also misunderstand things. What is passion then? And if you go back to, again, the original language, passion was really not a good, a fun thing. I guess it's a fun thing because when you look at the word passion, we have Americanized it to mean the thing that drives you. But really, what passion is the thing you're willing to suffer for. And you think of the common phrase, especially when you think about during Easter time, which was just a few months ago, the
Yeah.
passion of the
Passion of the
Christ,
Christ.
right?
Yep.
What do we mean when we say the passion of the Christ? And it's not just for people who are of faith. Everybody understands that concept. The passion of the Christ is the suffering of Christ. And I have a passion for
Mm.
this thing. I have a passion for, whatever it is. And you say that, what you're saying really is, I love this thing so much, I'm willing to suffer for it. I'm willing to go through pain. So compassion is finding that thing that you are comfortable, finding that level of pain that you're comfortable with. And this is why self compassion is so important, because I believe it is the thing that keeps us from overcoming mediocrity. Is I need to find that thing, that hard thing that I'm willing to do. I need to do the things with passion, okay? The things that are bring suffering into my life, the hard thing. And I don't mean, like the old desert fathers and the monks, kind of suffering where they would flagellate themselves and stuff like that and go on, vows of silence and extensive fasts and starve themselves. I don't mean that kind of suffering. I don't mean being
Hmm.
sick. I mean, you've got to find the thing that you're willing to pay the price for. Self-compassion is being willing to do the hard thing that gets you to the place you want to be. That's what truly it means to be compassionate. Is I've got to help. So be compassionate towards others is helping other people do the hard thing to get them to where they want to be. Self-compassion is you being willing to do the hard thing to get you to the place where you want to be. That's what self-compassion is really about.
And that place where you want to be, it can it is probably different for everybody,
Every single person is going to have
right?
a different thing. Yep.
I mean, somebody wants to be a really great parent. It could be simple as or a really great friend, or have lots of have really good friends, or become a professional basketball player. A lot of
Exactly.
pain, a lot of sacrifice that has to go with that. That is very interesting, and that is a really interesting perspective that I certainly haven't talked about or haven't thought about. Let's. This has been wonderful. One of the things and maybe we can end on this, you know, a lot of this has to do with yourself and has to do with, well, all the things that we talked about. How important is it to surround yourself with people who support your journey?
So critical. Well, one of the things that I actually write about in the epilogue to the Becoming Epic is what I call my battle strategy. And
Hmm.
so battle I've created as an acronym, and it's something that my wife and I use to help us every day in the battle that we are in. And so the acronym is, I won't go through the whole thing, but be brave, armor up. And the first T is trust your team. And what's so important, it's exactly what you're talking about, because you cannot achieve any of the things we're talking about, and certainly you can't find better if you don't surround yourself with the right people. And we need people in our lives to point out hindsight bias, which is, again, going back to the contextual intelligence book. I talked about hindsight, insight, and foresight. Hindsight is how we use the past to make sense of our present. And most of the time, we grossly misunderstand the past and actually misremember the past. And hindsight bias is a real phenomenon that psychologists and sociologists have been talking about for years. But hindsight bias is simply misremembering the past in your favor. And I believe that's
Hmm.
one of the things that keeps us in mediocrity. And the only way that we know, and this isn't just my experience, this is actually scientific evidence, is very, very strong in this area, that the only real way a human being can get past hindsight bias is with the help of another perspective. You need someone else who can see differently than you see. And that helps us get past hindsight bias. And that helps you get out of your own muck, get out of your own discouragement, get out of your own way. So to answer your question directly, is it's incredibly important. I I don't know that there's anything better that a person can do to help them improve their life than by surrounding themselves with people who they can trust, who will challenge them, who will move them forward, who will offer a different perception and perspective. I think that's critical, and you have to have those people around you. And if you don't, that's the first thing you should do to overcome mediocrity and get out of it, is find people who are better than you who can help you.
Yeah, if you're trying to become a professional basketball player and you're 17 years old playing with 6-year-olds, it's going to be
Exactly.
tough to get better. But
Absolutely.
yeah, and surrounding yourself with those kinds of supportive people, that's really cool. And everybody can do that. So again, though, if people don't have that team of people, how do they go about building it?
Well, so you ask around. I mean, again, it's
Good.
not that I don't want to oversimplify it, or sound parochial or anything like that, but it really is ask around. Back to your example, if I want to be a basketball player, then I go find out where basketball players hang out. I go to the park, I go to the gyms, I go to places like this, and who's good around here. If I want to be a better father, I ask around, who are the best dads you know? If I want to be a better husband, who are the best husbands you know? And hang around with them. Don't hang, you just have to find better people. And you start by asking around and then watching
Ask.
people. Yeah.
Ask. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that because, I have found that it is so, so important, especially especially when you're in tough times, right? If you're in a rut, but it's just amazing. Years and years and years ago, leadership, I read somewhere that the greatest leaders surround themselves with people better than they are.
Yeah.
And I have been blessed with almost armies of people around me who are far better, far better than me than I'll ever be. And and it lifts you. It really does lift you.
It
And
absolutely does. And I've had the
and
same
and it's
blessing.
it's incredibly powerful. We Matt, we've talked about a lot of things. Close us out. What do you want? What do you want to leave? And then after you close us out, I'm going to ask you, how do people learn more? How do people get in touch with you? But what do you want to leave with this audience?
I would love for your audience to know that it is possible and easier than you think to actually transcend your current state and become the person you want to be. It is not outside of the realm of possibility. It is absolutely possible, even probable, if you ask the right questions, find the right people. You can be better than who you are right now. Even if you're already awesome, you can still be better. And that's
Everybody
so
can be
important.
better.
Yeah, everybody
Yeah.
can be better. And hopefully, some of the things that I've written and said and can help you on that journey. And I would be honored to contribute in any way if I could.
That is wonderful. Well, you already have. You already have, and I'm taking away a number of things. I as you were talking, I wrote down a bunch of notes of some of the things that you said. So I hope some of my listeners have done the same thing. Okay, how do people reach you? So the name of your book coming up this summer, and summer is here.
Yep.
Um, it's right around the corner. It's called Becoming Epic: How Excellence, Perception, Inspiration, and Compassion Drive Joy and Fulfillment and Help You Transcend Mediocrity.
Yeah.
So that's coming. If folks want to learn more beyond that, or whatever, reach you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, the best place is my website,
Okay.
MatthewKutz.com. Is easiest. You can pre-order the book there. It's hopefully the plan is late July, early August. The book will be out. So it's already on the beta testing phase, and it's already had advanced readers and all that. So might be able to even find an advanced reader copy out there on eBay or something somewhere. But the best place is just go to my website. There's a place to buy an advanced copy. My other books are available there. A bunch of articles, things like that are there as well. So MatthewKutz.com. And then I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Wonderful. So Matthew Kutz, and Kutz is spelled
Kutz. Yep.
Kutz.
Yes.
Okay. Kutz. So MatthewKutz.com. Matt, this has been amazing. This has been wonderful. And I know that everybody listening has gotten something amazing
Oh,
out
I
of
appreciate
this.
it.
And the other thing, the last thing I just want to end with is that, you talked about how having your team around you can help you with your hindsight bias, right?
Mhm.
Um, I gotta believe they can help you with your current insight bias as well as your foresight bias as well, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, people who know you especially, my gosh, they
I'll
could tell
say
you things
this,
about.
if you want more on that, you can actually also get my book on contextual intelligence, where I describe that for what you're describing is what I call the Christmas ghost scenario. Everybody needs Christmas ghosts. And I
Yeah,
use
yeah,
Ebenezer Scrooge's story.
yeah,
You know,
the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and
yep.
future.
Yep,
That's it.
yep. I mean,
That's
we
it.
all need,
I
and
love
that
it.
go to your people you're talking about. We need to have Christmas. The people around us need to be the Christmas ghosts, and to help us see what really happened in the past, what's happening right now, and what will happen in the future if we continue. And that's what the Christmas ghosts are all about. And that sums up your point perfectly, is we all need Christmas ghosts in our life.
And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And and in the case of Ebenezer Scrooge, those Christmas ghosts changed his life, right?
Absolutely.
They
He
changed
became
his life,
I mean, Charles Dickens said he became the best man the town had ever known.
right?
Yep.
Wonderful. We will end on that. Matt, you're wonderful. I love you. God bless you. Thank you for joining me. Everybody, rewind, take a listen to this thing again. And remember, his book coming out is called Becoming Epic by Matthew Kutz and MatthewKutz.com. Okay. I love you. God bless you. All I ask is you share this because when you share this, you're going to help somebody. All right.
Amen.
See you next time. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.